Hi, this is Karen, and I am one of the co-admins at the SLPs of Color. We are an inclusive and intersectional community for SLPs, audiologists, and students. Today is one of two episodes where Aya and I are interviewing Miki Shibata, a Japanese-Korean-American bilingual SLP based in Washington, D.C. Listen as Miki shares her experiences entering the field as an out-of-field applicant. We learn about her parents' backgrounds, her experiences working abroad in Japan, starting her own private practice for dysphagia, aphasia, and motor speech disorders, and bilingual therapy services. Thanks.
Miki, thank you for joining us. We're happy to have
Hello.
you.
Miki, how do you identify yourself?
So my name is Miki Diane Shibata. I am a Asian hyphenated American through and through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm half Japanese and half Korean. I'm Buddhist. I practice with Soka Gakkai International, USA. Right now I'm doing a little less, but at one point I was doing a lot with them. So I do a lot of like youth organization stuff. I was born in New Jersey, and I've been an SLP for about 5 years now, and I work in acute care mostly, full time, and I also have a private practice. So
That's awesome. Is your private practice like similar to the work that you do with the adult population?
no, it's completely different. So it just kind of happened via happenstance plus need, but I actually, most of my clients are children that come from Japanese speaking families.
That's awesome.
Yeah, since I'm bilingual in Japanese and English, some people that I knew from this area mentioned to me before, like one of them is also Japanese, but she's an occupational therapist working in the schools. And she was like, there's a lot of people looking for a Japanese speech pathologist.
Yeah.
And I was like, who are these people? Because I've never heard of them. But apparently there was. And, some people found me. I posted on some like Japanese Craigslist type things. There's one in usually every area, like popular area, I would say. And then people were like, hey, my son's 2, he's not talking, like what's going on? And I'm like, oh, so yeah, that's what I do for my private practice mostly.
That is so awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear more about it. I know we have some questions later about like how you got started and kind of telling us a little more about kind of that process and things. But let's circle back to your childhood. So tell us about your childhood. Where did you grow up? You mentioned that you were born in New Jersey. Were you raised there or did you move out?
So kind of a funny story. So I'm born in New Jersey, but my parents lived apart for a little bit when I was younger. So from like infancy to 4, I actually lived with my mom and my grandparents in Japan. So my first language is Japanese. So my mom is ethnically Korean, even though she's born and raised in Japan, and both her parents are ethnically Korean. And funny story is, like, so she went back initially because she needed to like re-up her permanent residency status. Like back in the day, Japan didn't recognize like citizenship through birth. Like it was like you had to have Japanese blood. So like my grandma, for example, was like already in Japan by the time the Pacific Theater of World War II started. But like she still was a Korean national. My mom, until she naturalized to a US citizen, she was a Korean national, South Korean national. So yeah, it's that I did. And then I moved back to the US when I was 5, and I stayed in New Jersey until I graduated high school.
That's so awesome. I have a couple friends from Jersey, and they always rave about the food there. So I am jealous that you.
Yeah, it's sad that New Jersey is like kind of like the armpit of the US. Like nobody knows about us, and then they talk trash. So
No.
I'm a New Jersey advocate through and through. There's some real good things about the New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey.
No, I've heard only good things. And so where do you currently live now? Like what state?
Yeah, right now I live in Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
not really a state,
No.
hoping to be, I think. I think that's something that we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
But yes.
Yeah. Well, still on the East Coast then. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your college experience? So where did you go to college
Yeah.
for like your bachelor's, and
Mm-hmm.
how did you end up deciding on speech pathology?
Yeah, so I went to Soka University of America in California. It's a small liberal arts school in Southern California in Orange County. And since it's a liberal arts school, like everybody graduates with a BA in liberal arts, and then you focus on like a concentration. And my concentration was humanities, and I took a bunch of international studies classes. So my initial education had nothing to do with speech. I had no idea what speech pathology was. Um, and yeah, college was interesting. I mean, like, I actually graduated high school in 3 years. I was like an accelerated student, not because I was smart, just because I could. And my family was having some financial issues at the time. So they were like, do you want to get your butt into college quicker? You know? And I was like, okay, what? Okay.
That sounds
So
good.
yeah, it was really funny. I actually brought printed out requirements for like New Jersey State and presented to my graduate, like my guidance counselors, and was like, "Hey, if I double up on English, I could graduate." Yeah, they were like,
I
I
guess
don't know
so.
about that," and I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure." So I kind of strong armed them into letting me do 3 years. But
That's
apparently
awesome.
afterwards, though, a bunch of people who come from different countries and were going back to do their college exams did the same thing. So they'd have an extra year so that they can study and they could
Yeah.
still be with like people their age. So apparently it became like a trend. Funny thing.
Look at that. You paved the way.
Uh, so yeah, that was my college experience, I would say. Yeah, nothing related to speech whatsoever.
Yeah. So then how did you end up in speech?
So it kind of like ties into what I did after college,
Okay.
but I actually taught English in Japan with the Japan and Exchange and Teaching program for 3 years.
That is
It's
awesome.
it's a program run by the Japanese Foreign Ministry and the Education Ministry and like the U.S. So U.S. is oh my God, I'm blanking. Anyway, one of the consulates or
Yeah.
whatever those things. Um, and so I decided to do that, and then I was teaching in like 5 elementary schools in my district. I was in charge of making the English curriculum for the district, make materials, and then I would like hop around on a moped. So like Monday was one school, Tuesday it was one
Oh
school,
my
and
gosh.
yeah, I did first through 6th grade, and I would just like keep on, I had a schedule. And so my first exposure to the thought of even speech came from that teaching experience where I liked teaching. I liked people a lot, but I didn't like the amount of kids that I had to deal with, like the amount of people. So I was
Yeah.
like, I really want to do some sort of like something that I could teach, but something that was a little bit more specialized, I guess. So when I started asking around, people, funny enough, so my mom is or was a manager for a nail salon. It's like that stereotype of an Asian American in a nail salon in New Jersey, but like that was my high school life. Um, and some of her clients were like, hey, would she be interested in speech? I'm a speech pathologist. So I actually set up 2 observations, one at a hospital, it was like a rehab hospital, and one was at a children's hospital. And I thought it was pretty cool. So I was like, okay, I'll apply to graduate school, I guess. And that's how I decided.
That is so cool. I think, wow, that is so awesome. What a way to end up in this like career path, and that is such an awesome experience that you got, like being able to teach in Japan. Because you had mentioned that you had lived in Japan until you were about 5 years old. Do you have like memories from that time, and was it kind of similar, like when you went back in your college years to live again for 3 years? Was it a lot different than you
Yeah.
remember?
So, I'm not sure if my memories are just like pinched together from photographs and like, relatives
Mhm.
telling you what you did.
Mhm.
But I have to say it was funny because, I'm a grown person
Mhm.
and do grown person things, but I had no idea how to be a Japanese, like, working person. So I
Mhm.
didn't know how to like purchase a ticket to the train at first.
Mhm.
Like I didn't know some of the more professional mannerisms. So like at some points, like it was like, for example, when I was out and about and I had no idea how to do something super basic and I have to ask like a shopkeeper or something,
Mhm.
they kind of treated me like I had an intellectual disability. It was so sad. Um,
No.
and like, so that type of experience of like, you speak the language, you look the
Mhm.
part, you have some insight into the culture, but
Mhm.
you were an expat essentially.
Yeah.
So there is a lot that I think that was really great about being there because like, elementary school was not something that I went to in Japan.
Mhm.
So seeing how that worked, and I think it was a reduction in fear factor for me, if anything,
Mhm.
because I think there was a lot of comparison growing up from like other people for whatever reason for their own egos. I think there were like Japanese moms and stuff that
Mhm.
like were like, oh, you're not Japanese enough, or like, you'd have the good old like, oh yeah, your English is so great, you're like so whitewashed, like growing
Jeez.
up here.
Mhm.
So I think there was a lot of like this fear of like not fitting in or not being accepted, which like totally, I mean, I
Mhm.
wasn't, but I think it was okay because I was able to feel an identity or make an identity for myself there that was like right for me, which was
Mhm.
like this returning person with the skill that was able to contribute and had a place professionally. So it really helped me gain confidence in that other
Mhm.
identity because I was like, oh, I can work here. It's a special like spot
Mhm.
professionally, but I don't have to be this like bona fide Japanese person.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I think that was super important. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds
Mm,
good.
I actually had
Uh,
a question.
yeah.
So, in regards to you speaking a little bit about your identity growing and then embracing yourself in Japan,
Hmm.
what was your identity growing up in New Jersey? Was it a predominantly white area? Was it pretty
Yeah.
diverse? And how did that transition into you finally being in Japan?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, my area that I moved it within New Jersey, but at first it was like an area, Palisades Park. It's kind of a lot of Korean people now, but back in the day it was mostly Hispanic people and like some Italian Americans. Um, and then, but it was pretty diverse in some ways. And then when I moved, it was a predominantly like white neighborhood because the school district was better, and I moved when I was in like 5th grade. And so that was kind of the first time I think that I got teased for speaking Japanese, or um and then at the time there was like this kind of contingent of Japanese people who like were like in the ESL classes, maybe not, but they were more, so there's like two different types of communities, and I don't know if this is the same in other East Asian or Asian communities, but they're people who come on business and then people who stay here. So the people who come on business tend to kind of like stick together a lot of the time and like hold true to that Japanese or like whatever culture. Sometimes you see it with Korean communities too in New Jersey. And then you have people like me who are just like, hey, my parents are living here and we're going to live here for the rest of our known lives. And so I suddenly like wasn't part of this group, but then like the ESL teacher would be like, hey man, like, do you need the phone page or like contact information of all the Japanese people in your neighborhood? And I'm like, no, why? Like, I've never had to do that. What do they know that I'm here now? What is going on?
They're just
So
following you.
yeah, it was strange. I think it was the first time that I was othered, I think. And that was just very confusing for me. But for whatever reason, I had like the greatest self-esteem when I was like in elementary school. Like, I didn't give a crap about anything. I wish I had some more of that now, but like I wasn't like phased by it at all. But I remember thinking it was really, really weird. So yeah, that was kind of the demographics. But yeah, then my parents, or my mom was a nail tech. And just as a backdrop side note, my parents were undocumented actually and I didn't find out until I was 20. Like, literally I was in college and I was like, hey, everybody's talking about their OPTs and like their student visas and whatever. Like, Mom, you work as a nail salon person and Dad hasn't worked in a while because he has a mental illness. What's going on with you guys? And then she was like driving the car and she like slowly pulled over, sighed deeply and was like, oh, it's time. And I'm like, time for what? What is the time? But it made a lot of sense because, so there was a little bit of like there was just strange identities going around a lot. And whenever I worked at the nail salon too, because you had this uniform of like the nail salon look. So it was interesting seeing the expectations that people had of me and my future, I guess, growing up, where some people were like, are you going to own a nail salon like your mom? And like, they had no bad feelings towards it, I guess, but I was like, no, I just graduated from a graduate school in speech pathology, like, and also I look, we kind of look on the younger side, or that's the stereotype, so a lot of people were like, are you a high school student? And I'm like, no, I'm literally 27. So yeah, that's kind of I don't think there was ever really a fitting in process. You were just a little peg off in whatever identity I was supposed to have. So
yeah, I feel that. I feel like that's kind of the dilemma of all the like first generation kids that live here and have these two dueling identities where like you're not quite 100% either one, and so you're never quite fit 100% in either one.
Yeah, and then like the curveball of the documentation issue where my mom was just like, and jab, like flank. But we are lucky insofar as that like Asians, it's East Asians, I should say, it's a lot, I don't want to say easier, but we don't face some of the other kind of discriminatory ideas that other like people from other countries face. So as soon as I turned 21, my mom did a lot of the legal process for citizenship. I became their legal sponsor. And it was really hard for them. They really struggled here because it's so terrifying to not have status. Like, but they did the best that they could and they paid their taxes. My mom's always like, please keep it positive. We paid all our taxes, like all of that. And I'm like, no, Mom, like, it's not even about that. You shouldn't feel lesser because of that experience. But yeah, so like I became their legal sponsor and they got their green cards and now my mom's naturalized. But, you know, that is also the added layer of it just being, like, it's just a whirlwind, you know, when you have things like that and competing identities growing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like it's so common that East Asians go under the radar when it comes to being undocumented. And so when people throw so much information or about being undocumented or DACA recipients, I feel like a lot of it's so misinformed, because when you look at the stats, a lot of individuals that are undocumented, a lot of them come from Asian countries.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's so much shame involved. And, you know, part of it is that people come for legal reasons, right? And most of them overstay their visas. And then there's this like 10-year, like you can't come back for 10 years type of thing. So like you have a kid and then you overstay your visa. What are you going to do? You're going to stay. Like, you know, if you feel like your child has better opportunities here, or just the penalty is too large. And, you know, you got to understand that a lot of these people, like my parents, for example, they're like in their 20s, like, and it's like, what, I'm 33, I'm supposed to be 33 this year. Like, I still don't know everything, you know, I still make mistakes. So it's kind of like, they're supposed to understand the entire immigration legal system, you know, and then they had, you know, my parents had also the added complication of my dad's like mental illness. So there was a, you know, difficult factor. He just couldn't keep jobs. And we didn't really know until his paranoia blew up. You know? We're like, oh, that's not right, you know. But, you know, there's reasons why it happens, I think, and you have to, like Karen, you said, like, it's overlooked, underlooked. I think sometimes it's easier that way because it is such a scapegoated topic where people don't like something that's going on. Oh, the undocumented, you know, let's talk about the undocumented and completely like use them as a scapegoat because we don't want to talk about something else. It happens a lot. And I think that it's unfortunate because I think there's a way to help these young people or people that are older, whatever, have more opportunities and access to health care, you know, law enforcement, even if that's a concern for certain people, opportunity without necessarily, you know, running into that narrative of like, oh, they did something wrong. Oh, they're going to become a burden. Like, you know, at least that wasn't my experience. And like, even if people become burdensome, let's just say, taking financial aid from the university, yeah, like I did. I mean, I have status, but what does that really mean? You know, did that cause harm to society truly? Like, there's a lot of things that people just don't think about that topic. And I actually specifically asked my mom for permission for this because it's been like, I've always been able to say it within close contacts or within confidence, but you know, I thought it was really important because so many of us remain invisible, you know, like, again, I have status and that's important, not just because I'm like, I have status pride, but like my experience is going to be way different from somebody who is actually undocumented my age, right? But I have the unique privilege of kind of talking about it because it doesn't endanger me directly. So yeah, like I really wanted to say, like, there's people like that in our field even, and also that, you know, watch what you say. You know, like, you don't know who you're hurting because so many people stay under the radar for very good reasons.
And then it's even harder to talk about it when you like hear these like kind of casual talk that ends up adding to your shame and adding to your feelings of like, well, now I really can't say anything and now I really don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, because so many people like assume that it's not you, right? Like it's not the person that they're talking to.
Absolutely. You're not included in this. Like, you're
Yeah,
not the
you
one I'm
don't.
talking
No,
about.
you're yellow. Like that doesn't make sense. And you're like, no, it happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. Thanks, my mom. She gave me
Yeah.
permission. No, and she's alive. Like that was more like New Jersey versus, you know.
Putting up to Jersey.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you to you and to your mom for giving permission to share that. I think that is such an important topic, but it's also a topic that has a lot of vulnerability attached to it. So we're so like honored that you shared that with us and on this platform. I wanted to segue back into your college experience and kind of ask you a little bit about how your master's, like what program did you attend? How was your program? And like your experience there?
Yeah. So again, just segueing back to the funny story of how I had no idea what the heck speech pathology was. I attended Teachers College, Columbia University, and they're really unique because they have spots for like career switchers. So I was part of that like group, about 10 of us, I would say. And it was a really good group. There is a bilingual extension program there, and that was one of the reasons why I picked it. But it was a little shocking, just as somebody who worked before. Even granted, I worked in Japan, but I grew up in this country, whatever, that it was like so white. It was like, wow. And I felt like I was really lucky because I had this unique cohort, at least, that were a little bit older, a little bit more work and life experience. No shade to people who go straight through, but it's just different, I think, when you come from a non-speech background and kind of like outsider looking in. And it was good overall. I think I went to a like West Coast crunchy granola school, so it was a little surprising when I heard some outdated notions about like Asian American myths, where it's like, oh, you guys are the model minority, like why is your situation so different from like BIPOC peeps, like particularly I think Black and Latinx people's experiences. I think there was like some comparison, the usual pressures of having to speak for your people. And I think there was also like a lot of the Asian languages, whenever it was introduced, or like multilingualism or multiculturalism, it tended to be kind of like, and if you're ever going to use it, here's some information. And that has changed a little bit since I graduated, but like, it definitely, and then like, because there's just not a lot of outreach to certain communities, right? Like whenever I was like, and Japanese, like that's my second language, people would kind of be like, but like who would need that? Like, who would, like, everybody knows if you're going to speak a bilingual language, it's got to be Spanish, or it's got to be like in New York, at least, it's like Haitian Creole. That's a big language too. And like I speak conversational Spanish, but I'm like not great at it. And then again, I was just like, but like I have, like I'm good at it, I have like a Japanese language proficiency test, like the highest level. Like I made sure to get it before I took the test, and I got it so I could show people that that's something that I could do for them. But it just seemed like it wasn't appreciated, or there just wasn't too much interest in that. And, you know, it was a little disappointing to hear that. I am not even going to pretend that like the discrimination or prejudice that, you know, I experience, for example, would be any comparison to like somebody who's Black or Latinx. But I think the problem is like we're often weaponized towards that communities, right? We're often used as like the comparison tool. Like our unique problem, I think, for AAPI groups, and again, like AAPI groups are not a monolith, but we get lumped together as such, and we don't have control over our narratives. Like people get to say whatever about us, and it's, you know, like the whole like COVID thing with like the China virus or Kung flu or whatever. Like it's just crazy how when it's convenient, Asian Americans are like one of the good ones, but when it's not convenient, flip. Absolutely. You know. So I think that for me, I knew that going into graduate school. I did the background work, you know, and it was just interesting to see that there was a world where this information in like such a high professional setting, you know, because it's a master's degree. Oh, girl, when I was growing up, a master's degree was like the thing to get. I was like, whoa, like that is what I'm going to do. Like my dreams ended at a master's degree.
That was the PhD of our time.
Growing up, you know, a PhD, like maybe if I wasn't like coming from struggling families, a PhD would have been a thing. But like, although my dad was always like, you're gonna have 3 kids by the time you're 30, be married, and also have a PhD. And I was like, are you trying to kill me? Like, I would die if that I were going to do that. But yeah, so it was just, it was shocking, a little disillusionment. I think there was a little bit of that. For sure. But and also there was like, you know, moments when you're doing your externships, and I think like there were sometimes the doctors during rounds and stuff would comment on how people with documentation issues were so difficult to deal with because of their social situation, and like side comments that don't need to be said. You know, and then you're like, oh, that's such a burden, right? Like my parents, I'm so sorry. Like, so things like that where it, you know, you just kind of, I know how to deal with it personally. I've found my own defense mechanisms. I grew up in a white neighborhood in the East Coast. Like, I know how to conduct myself as a hyphenated American. But that feeling of like, oh man, even here is strong, you know, and was strong in graduate school. Also because you're like not showered, and you're tired, and you're like emotionally like so little reserve, and all of this is happening. It's just really hard, I think.
No, and it just goes back to like people have an image that they think of when they hear these words, and if you don't fit that image, they don't assume that it applies to you, which gives them the leeway to like be so like casual with saying it in front of you, because they're like, oh well, you know, I'm not, you don't count in this, like we're not undocumented, what are you talking about? So it's a rough thing to be like a part of. So what did you kind of do after college? Can you tell us a little bit about your CFY experience?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was a little bit older, so I was dating somebody at the time, and we got engaged after, like, at my final year of graduate school. So I was like, well, I guess one of us needs to move. You know, it was long distance. He was studying in DC, and I was in New York. and we met while we were on the JET program in Japan. He's as white as they come. If anybody has questions, he's a Irish American. Yeah, big beard. So not a Japanese person. Sorry to, bust all of your bubbles. So I decided to take a CF at a subacute rehab and SNF. It's really hard if you're location dependent, if you're interested in like acute care, or like hospitals. So I found that, and I found it actually because I contacted the student liaison to the District of Columbia's Speech and Hearing Association. There was a person's number who was listed, Eno, she's my faves, Umo. And I reached out to her and she was like, yeah, set up an observation, and this was before I graduated. So once I graduated and I saw that they had an opening, I was like, oh, cool. Like maybe I know this place. I like visited there. So let me give that a shot. So that's how I decided. And it's also a SAR SNF that takes like trach vent and medically complex patients. So I decided to do my CF there.
Yeah, that's so cool. What led to you choosing to become a medical SLP versus a school-based one? Is that kind of the population that you enjoyed working with the most?
Yeah, so again, tabla rosa, right? I was like completely dumb about speech when I first started, but I realized pretty early on that I liked working with adults. When I got my first adult client that had aphasia, my brain really liked the deficit model that's part of the adult medical speech pathology. So for example, like somebody was at a certain ability in speech, ability in cognition, ability in motor speech, but because of some neuro event or some other event, now they have strengths and weaknesses in certain areas. So your job is to rehabilitate them as close to that baseline as possible. That type of, like, you start from here, go to there, move up to here, just clicked with my brain. So I was like, ooh, I really like this. And then I also had a really great clinical supervisor who mentored me into some of like the good hospital externships in the area in New York. And I did, I was fortunate enough to get 2 acute care externships, and I loved it. And I was like, this is so cool. I want to do more of this. Even though my first externship, I thought I bombed. Like, it was my first medical externship. It was super hard. I cried every day in like the storage closet where I was cleaning fee scopes. Yeah, I actually went to my program director and I was like, I think I brought shame upon our program. And she was like, I think you're okay. This is your first medical placement. I was like, you do not understand. I have brought shame. And she's like, okay. Okay, Miki.
Not sure it's that extreme.
Yeah. She was like, you're a student. It's your first placement. Like, chill out.
Now, students are the hardest on themselves, as we know.
Yeah. So yeah, I got really interested and I did that. I did the aphasia clinic at my school, and I really love that because you like had your own clients, 1 or 2, but you also did groups on some Saturdays, and that really helped to kind of get like that complete, like almost outpatient experience. And it was just a really good foundation, because I think like, especially when you do inpatient stuff, I feel like that foundation that you have in like writing all of the documentation in such like a exact and almost profuse way is really important, because it gives you a foundation and what little parameters that you could look at, and then what you want to focus on when you're working with a person with a limited amount of time. So yeah, it was just an excellent experience that I was able to have in my graduate school. So yeah, and I was like, I love it. That's what I want. This is what I'm gonna do.
That's so perfect. So are you currently with the same in the same like setting, like acute care, and in the same hospital as you did your CF, or are you somewhere different?
So right now, I kind of like got different experiences, different settings, and I started as a PRN here, but it's a large acute care hospital in DC, and then I wiggled my, way into this position. I actually started covering for somebody's maternity leave as a PRN. Still stayed PRN when she came back, and just kind of bided my time to see what positions opened. But the reason why I really like this particular place is because we're a comprehensive stroke center, we're a level 1 trauma center, we're a burn center, we're a teaching hospital, and we have a large cardiac program. So it's just, you list the ICU and we would probably have it. The medical acuity of these patients are quite high, and I love it. I would say 80% of our caseload is some sort of dysphagia. Then we have like our trach patients, speaking valves plus dysphagia, and then like the stroke, language, motor, speech, cognitive stuff. And then we also have a small but significant outpatient program for the tracheoesophageal prosthesis, puncture prosthesis management for head and neck cancer. We do quite a few laryngectomies at our hospital, and also resection surgeries, so like mandibulectomies and things like that for the oral cancer patients. So we do see a lot of that as well.
That is so cool. Wow, you do get a lot of like
It's varied.
Such a range of the medical.
Yeah, we do our MBSs, we do our aphases, we do our speaking valves, and then we do TEPs. Like it's a lot, but it's really fun. So
yeah, no, it definitely keeps it interesting. You kind of get something new every day. So that's super cool. I love that. I'm going to hop back into the question about your private practice. So can you kind of shared a little bit about the why you started it and kind of like how it got started. Were there any kind of like unexpected challenges that you faced while you were starting it?
Yeah, so, I kind of went into a self-development journey about 3 years into my career. And that's because, like I mentioned, I was doing a bunch of PRN jobs. And at one point before this position, I took a position at a really well-known academic medical center in the area. And like, I utterly failed. Like, I was going through some family emergencies, but also like I had a lot of growing still to do as an acute care SLP, and man, crashed and burned. And I was like, if I can't make it at such a hot, kind of like the pinnacle of acute care, and this is all I wanted to do, right? Is this what I wanted to do? Is this right for me? So, then I was like, what should I do? And I was taking a bunch of CUs, and I joined like the medical SLP collective when it was still like a beta thing, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. What a great community. And then I actually decided to join Teresa Richards's Inner Circle Leadership Academy, which is like a mastermind for SLPs. And as a part of that, I got exposed to people who were like rocking it as a clinician, a researcher, a private business owner. And I saw other people in the program. They were like, maybe private practice was one of the things that I could do. And, that planted the seed of like, wow, maybe I could do this too. That's really cool to have something uniquely your own. then, like I said before, I had people kind of that I knew who spoke Japanese in this area, and they were like, hey, you know, people know your name, like they're looking for a Japanese speaking speech pathologist. They know your name just because your name pops up on LinkedIn as a Japanese person and you're in the area. So like, you know, apparently there was a need. So I was like, all right, maybe this is a gap that I could try and fill. And you know, I just wanted, like, your 30s is such a cool time because like you're starting to have more stability in your career, you're getting, or you're, I guess, like 5 years in, whatever, like you're starting to get some confidence, right? As a clinician. So there's so many things that you can do. So I just got really excited about doing different things. And I was like, oh, maybe I should try this. And oh, maybe I should try that. And I think in terms of unexpected challenges, I mean, you know, just to cover the obvious, but you never know when a global pandemic is going to hit. So I was like a mobile outpatient service, but, you know, so some clients were like, you know, we want to put it on hold. And then other clients were like, I want teletherapy. So I was just like, oh, and I had to learn how to do such a niche thing, right? Because I'm like purchasing things from Amazon Japan. Like I'm asking other Japanese speech pathologists how they do different things. I'm making my own materials. Like how to then do that in a teletherapy platform was really surprising. And you know, I'm managing, and I'm glad that I learned, because the next person who reached out to me was actually in Hawaii. So I was like, well, now that I know how to do this, like I can do this. And then there's that as well, because if you're kind of niching yourself down, you know, you never know where your people are coming from, like which state your client is going to be in. So I was like, oh, now I need to get a Hawaii license. So like, how do I get a Hawaii SLP license? So, you know, definitely like there's a lot of unexpected challenges, and you know, I can't really go into too much here, but like navigating how you have a private practice with a full-time job is also difficult in many ways. But yeah,
Do you have any advice for those that are looking to start their own practice?
Yeah, you know, so I think you need to really consider your motivations for it. So like, for example, like just because you can do it all doesn't mean you have to. Like burnout is such a significant thing in our field, I think. And also like young women too, they just are so hard on themselves. Like they need to be like everything and more, right? So like it just because you can doesn't mean you need to. But like, for example, if there's like a burning need that there's a burning need for pediatric feeding therapy in your area, and you're like, I could do this, like, oh my God, that's a good motivation. Or like if you're really great and you love something like aphasia, praxia, for example, and that's what you want to do all day, every day, like that's good too. Like you found your passion and that's where you want to be. And like, you know, if you work for like an outpatient group, right, like other person's private practice, like likely that's not going to be the person that you get all the time in your client list. You're probably going to get some sort of variation, because you need to serve everybody, right? But if you like are able to market yourself as this like specific thing, and that is what you love, and like some people, that's what they're so concerned about. Like that is their number one issue, and they want somebody who just loves it, because it's like the energy is so, sometimes SLPs, like myself included, if we're not doing things that we absolutely love, sometimes they're like, great, like this is, you know, you shouldn't, but it happens, right? Like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna do some blah 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 therapy. So excited. But when you're like doing something that you really love, and they like the patients really know that and really feel motivated towards that, But what I think you need to be careful about, it's going to be challenging like anything else, and it's going to have its own troubles like anything else. It's also a big responsibility, right? You really want to be running toward a private practice versus like using it, you're starting one because you're running away from like a hard situation at work or running away from something. And I say that with the understanding that it's just shit hard. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this podcast.
It's fine. Yeah, I don't think anyone cares.
Yeah, it's shit hard being an SLP, right? Like you are dealing with people's health. Your outcomes are their health. So the pressure is high. Medicine, in terms of management, it's a business in many ways. So some people really struggle with that, like relationship as a professional to your superiors, your inferiors. But those are things that you need to learn how to deal with to some degree. Again, there's toxic job environments. That's a completely different story. But to some degree, right? We can't, like it can't just be your escape route. Because if you do use it that way, like you don't have a niche, right? You don't have like a group, like a client population to market to. And then now you're stuck in a hole, right? Financially, because you need a way to finance this thing. So I think just considering your motivations, that's really important. It's probably important for anything that you do, but I think that would be my recommendation. And then on that note, on the flip side, everybody will tell you that you're too young, and then once you reach a age that you're too old to start something, right? So if fear is the only thing that's getting in your way, like let's say you have this like burning passion for, dear God, I don't know, providing Japanese speech therapy to the bilingual Japanese and English children of America, then you might want to go for it, because like no one is going to give you permission in this world, right? Like if you're waiting for somebody to say, yeah, Miki, you're ready, or like, yeah, Karen, you're ready, like it's just not going to happen, so that's probably when and where that step might be good, because like starting anything new at any age is just so friggin' scary. It's just what it is. So
I feel like it falls with, no matter how much you prepare for something, there's always going to be obstacles that you'll face that you never anticipated. Yeah, and so hopefully, and I know not even hopefully, that people will be able to listen to your advice and maybe re-examine why they have started a private practice, or if they're wanting to start a private practice, because I think what you mentioned was valid, was just not just being fully autonomous in your workplace, but recognizing that there might be certain hierarchies and still advocating for yourself, but learning how to still work with other people and build that collaboration, especially if it's interdisciplinary.
Yeah, as a business owner, I feel like one day your goal, right, is going to be to grow. And if that is the case, then you're going to have to manage people, then you're going to have to maybe collaborate with other business owners. And those are all things that are going to be so great if you have skills to do. And again, like if you don't have them, again, it shouldn't be no reason why you don't start. If like your motivations are like, God, I love this thing, or like, God, there's such a need in this area and I want to be that person who provides it. Fuck yeah, go for it, But if you're just, I guess I just want to make sure that like people are happy about doing it and it doesn't become just an added stressor, right? So I think it's a great option. It's wonderful. I love having my own thing. And my whole thing has been that I just want to be there for the clients that need me, where those clients may be. one of my clients, they got initially denied a speech evaluation from their district because the child primarily spoke Japanese, even though he's a US national. Yeah. And it was stunning to hear. They're like, well, he doesn't speak English yet. Like, who's going to evaluate him? And this is a school district, right? And they sent me a consult and we spoke on the phone, and I was like, first and foremost, that's absolutely contrary to IDEA, and like, that's unacceptable. Like, and here's some pro bono lawyers, and you also this is what it says about evaluations, how they need to make reasonable accommodations if they're not able to provide that specific language, like reasonable accommodations, whether it's like a phone interpreter or an interpreter, right? Sometimes it's not perfect, but you can't deny somebody based on the fact that they're just a bilingual child.
Absolutely.
And her, like, the kid's dad is an English speaker. So it was wild. So, and the mom was just like bawling on the phone telling me about this. And she's like, I'm an educator in Japan. I used to teach, so I know my kid is delayed. Like, he needs help, but they won't give it to me. And it was heartbreaking, But then after we spoke, she went back with that information and re-petitioned to her school district and evaluation. So, like, that's why I really do what I do. It kind of was really just a linking up of needs, but like, I realized that, it's a lot of these kids were like me growing up, where like people were like, oh, your Japanese is funny, or my parents were like, why are you mixing up your languages? Like, you're getting confused, and like all these things, right? When it's like not true. Or so many of the kids who don't grow up in bilingual environments, or they're not a lot of people who speak their language. Like, they get so limited and pressured based on incorrect knowledge to switch over to just one language. And that happens a lot with Japanese speaking kids that grow up here. So I was just like, it's so unacceptable. So yeah, like, you got to know why you're doing it. You got to know, and if that's a good link, then I feel like you're going to be happy. So
it's so empowering hearing you speak about this experience, and I hope that any other private practice individuals or people who are looking to go into private practice can have a similar motivation or drive as you, because I don't know how often people think about these kind of situations where someone might not be speaking the predominant language in that school system and how that impacts them, because I know that even in a bunch of districts, they aren't even able to find Spanish interpreters for IEP meetings. Even though maybe a large portion of the students in the school do speak Spanish. So how do you serve your students, and how do you serve the adults that are also seeking speech therapy? And there's just so much to think about. And
I think the problem is that, like, people don't know about these laws. So many people are just like trying to survive and live, like, if they're from a different country, like immigrated over or whatever, and they don't want to cause trouble, right? And they just don't know about what their rights are. And I think that sometimes people, if they're not pushed, then take the easy path, and it's not fair. Like, I just think, that is your connection with your mom, your dad, your grandma, your aunts. Like, if that community is important to you, you don't have to speak a different language if you're like multicultural, multilingual. That's not what it's about, right? Like, everybody deserves to have whatever degree of identity and whatever that they want. That's not it. There's reasons why certain communities, AAPI communities, for example, don't speak that language. There's historical reasons why. So let's not like cast shade upon those people. But if we choose to do so, if that is a desire, then it's just not fair to deny that based on like outdated information or just convenience. It's just not right, and I don't like it. So yes, so that is my little rant.
That's perfect.
We would like to thank Miki for joining us on the SLPs of Color podcast. Look out for the second part of Miki's interview next week. Miki is also raising funds to provide high-quality mobile outpatient and teletherapy motor speech, language, and swallowing therapy services to the people in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area. So I will be sharing that link in the YouTube description below. If you don't already follow us, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts at SLPs of Color. Make sure to follow, subscribe, give us a rating, and leave us a review so that others can find us. You can also leave us a voice message with feedback for this episode at 510-255-5620. Thank you.